All right, well, welcome to the MARY HYTKEN DUMONT University here at Baron Hirsch. We've transitioned from the Anshe to the Baron Hirsch, but the MARY HYTKEN DUMONT University goes on. Memory of Mary Hytken, of blessed memory, established by her children. I'm going to give out these sheets here. Our topic for tonight is Mishlei. Mishlei in comparison with Mishlei Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, comparison with the book of Ben Sira. So firstly, what's Mishlei and what's Ben Sira? And tonight we're going to speak on wisdom. We're going to talk about these two books and their relationship to wisdom in general, the Jewish approach to wisdom, Chochmah. So we turn to Mishlei. So what is the book of Mishlei? Well, it says the very first verse says it's Mishlei Shlomo ben David. That these are the Mishalim, the Proverbs. We usually say mashal. Today we say it means a parable, but it's more like a Proverbs of Solomon. We know that Solomon was very wise. We'll see the verses later in the Book of Kings, and it said that he made many proverbs, and indeed here we have them. However, there's another little twist to it in chapter 25. You have that here. Chapter 25. It says as follows. This is on your sheet, page 1. These are also the Mishalim. After chapter 25, going all the way to chapter 31, these are also the Mishalim that Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. So now it gets a little murky. Okay, so then it was done by Solomon, but transmitted. Let's see, we had the Ralbag as a commentary. He says, he said that the sages who were in the days of Chizkiah, they copied this over. Why did we separate this from the other ones? According to the Talmud and Bava Batra, all Proverbs are from Solomon, edited by Chizkiah. So then what's the difference in chapter 25? Could be that the original ones were already in the words of Solomon, first 25 chapters, and the other ones were more redacted by the people of Chizkiah. So usually the Talmud is very into early dating. If it's a book of Samuel, it's written by Samuel. It's not written by some later people. However, here the Talmud is saying that although Solomon was a king in the early temple period and Hezekiah was a king in the later temple period, that actually it's Hezekiah who was full of wisdom, right? There was so much wisdom in his day that you could ask any child from the north to the south any question about halakha or anything, and they would tell you. So too, he was involved in the book of Mishlei. So Mishlei, Proverbs, wisdom. And one of the things we're looking at tonight we're talking about the topic of wisdom in general. And one of the things we're looking at specifically is, what is a Jewish view of wisdom? What does it mean, wisdom? Wisdom about what? What kind of wisdom? Street smarts, this kind of smarts. What exactly, what Torah wisdom, what are we talking about? Now we also want to look at Ben Sira. That was a little bit unusual. Ben Sira generally is described as a apocryphal book, meaning it's not part of Tanakh. And let me be clear, it's not part of Tanakh. It's not part of the Hebrew scriptures. However, as we'll see, the Talmud did not completely reject this book either. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So let's take a look here. When was it written? It was written by a fellow whose grandson copied it, and he lived around the 2nd century BC. Some say around 175 BCE, before Common Era. In Bava Kama, that's in the Talmud 92b, it says that Rava said to another rabbi, "From where does this matter derive, whereby people say a bad palm tree strolls and goes to be among a grove of barren trees? Bad people seek other bad people." Where do we know this from? In other words, all wisdom must be found somewhere in our tradition. So that's a nice statement that people have. Good evening, Ruth. Where the class is on. So it's a nice statement that people have. So there must be a source for it in the Torah. So he says this matter is written in the Torah, it's repeated in the prophets, and triplicated in the writings. and we learned in the Mishnah, and we learned in the Braita. So the Gemara goes on to show that this idea that bad people attract bad people, they seek other bad people, this is found all over the place. We're not interested in the Torah or the prophets. We're interested in the book of Ben Sira, because we're comparing it to the book of Mishlei. So it says it's triplicated in the writings. It's also found in the writings, is the line that starts 11:3. So it's also found in the writings. Welcome, Dr. Lieberman. So the Talmud says, how do we know a certain idea? It's found in the Torah, it's found in the prophets, and it's found in triplicated in the writings. The writings, that's, you know the writings, the scriptures, the Tanakh, the Ch part of Tanakh, right? So it should be Psalms, Proverbs. But instead of quoting Proverbs, they quote, all fowl will live with its kind, and man with those like him. Book of Ben Sira, 13:17. The book we have today, it's there. And we also learned in the Mishnah, etc. So when the Talmud is talking about the Ketuvim, about the scriptures, about the third part of the Torah, it includes Ben Sira. Now, this is not to say that they really viewed it as part of the Ketuvim, but in other words, it's good enough. It sort of snuck in. In this particular homily, it was good enough that this idea was found in a Jewish book called Ben Sira. Although Mishlei is attributed to Solomon and edited by Hezekiah before the year, I would say before 500, right, about 1000 BCE and 500 BCE, but I'm sorry, 600 BCE, but the book of Ben Sira, which is from 2nd century BCE, is also quoted as some sort of a Jewish source. Now, when we talk about Ben Sira, just stop for a moment. What do you mean the book of Ben Sira? Where is it? Where do you find it? No. Where do you find it? So generally, if you're looking in general in a library, you go to the Apocrypha, and there you'll find it over there. It's in the books that are not part of the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures. Even Christians don't consider it part of what they call the Old Testament. Catholics have it as part of the Apocrypha. So you can find it, if you're looking for it, you can find it over there. Fine. But how do we know that's the real book? Because the Christians had it. A lot of Christians preserved it in the Greek. So that was preserved. But what's the original book? So originally we didn't have the book so much. The Christians were better preservers of it. Until around the 10th century, Jews used the book. How do we know? You can find it in the Geniza, when people were hiding things in the attic in the room over there in Cairo. They were using it in the 10th century. They were using it. Ruth, if you could just mute yourself. They were using it in the 10th century. So they had the Hebrew version of it. Then it was lost. Then in the Cairo Geniza, we found about 6 different versions of it. Then in Qumran, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we found little tiny pieces of it. Then in Masada, we found a little tiny piece of it. So we see clearly that it's not a Greek book, wasn't written in Greek. There is a Hebrew version, and we have most of the chapters of it, and there are many editions of it. Get them online, in writing, in print. Salman Schechter came out with one because he was very involved in the early Geniza. About the professor Salman Schechter, in the late 1800s, he came out with an edition of it. So generally speaking, when we refer to the book tonight, we're going to try to use the Hebrew version of it, except when it doesn't exist. Okay. So so you say, well, is it a Jewish book? What are we studying this for? Well, the Talmud and Baba Kama, they refer to it as part of the scriptures, the third part of Tanakh. I don't think they mean that seriously, but they mean it that it's good enough to, if you want to say how widespread this idea is, found in the Torah, the prophets, and it's in Ben Sira, which is a half-decent book. Also, they say that it's not the proper manner of conduct in a son-in-law to live in the father-in-law's house. How do we know that? You shouldn't live in your father-in-law's house. Maybe he's not modest or whatever. So it says, Kidichtiv Ben Sira, like it says, like it states in Ben Sira. States. The word Kidichtiv as it states, is a technical expression in the Talmud. It means scripture. And it quotes the verse. He says, I have weighed everything in the pan of balance, the balance of a scale, and I found anything inferior to bran. but inferior to Bran is a son-in-law who lived in his father-in-law's house. Okay, so it's very bad. So interesting. The Talmud refers to Kiddushim as it's written. Written, it's not written. Why don't you consider it part of maybe the oral tradition? Why do you say there was once some guy whoever heard of him, his name is Ben Sira, and he wrote this thing. Why do they say Kiddushim as it's written? Apparently, they viewed it to some degree as something worthy of right. However, Talmud in Sanhedrin says that Rabbi Akiva says also one who reads external literature has no share in the world to come. And the sages taught in the bright side, this is a reference to the reading of the book of heretics. And Rabbi Yosef says it's also prohibited to read the book of Ben Sira due to its problematic content. Rabbi Yosef says, even though there are books that are inappropriate, and there are things that are inappropriate in Ben Sira, we teach the superior matters that are in it, even in public. So we have the Talmud itself quoting in some passages, two passages we saw quoting Ben Sira. We have an opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who's very, very important, obviously, in Jewish law, who says it's terrible. You don't have a portion of the world to come if you waste your time on these things, and who knows, maybe it has bad ideas in it. And Rav Yosef says that it includes Ben Sira. However, Rav Yosef, who explains Rabbi Akiva, he says that you could teach the proper things that are good. So hopefully, in this class, we'll only learn proper things from Ben Sira. Maybe we will talk about ways in which his discussion about wisdom this week, family next week, and friendship next week, and family the following week, we'll talk about how perhaps was not the most appropriate. We'll see it's maybe not the most Jewish ideas. However, we're going to assume that you can even teach it in public, and we're okay. Okay. Now, just before we run into today's topic, which is the wisdom in the book of Mishlei and the book of Ben Sira, just a couple of things about how this book does contain some things that are very interesting. One, which I'm not sure I understand exactly, but the avoda, the story of how we describe on Yom Kippur the worship of the high priest in the temple, is also found in the book of Ben Sira, something similar. Okay, that's not so convincing. Something more interesting, the benching is alluded to, the language we use in some of our prayers. You say to yourself, where do the rabbis get the language we have in our prayers? The language of Shemona Esrei, the language of, I'm on page 2 at the top, the language of Shemona Esrei, the language of benching. So look at this. Rachem al Tzion mikra kode, what's it, he says? Something, nikra bishmecha. Have mercy on the nation, on nikra, a nation that's called by your name. Rachem al kiryat kodshecha, Yerushalayim echon shemecha. These phrases sound very much like the third blessing in benching. So there's a little bit of benching alluded to in this Cambridge manuscript and Ben Sira chapter 35. What also very significant is the blessing of a rainbow. How do we know that Jews make blessings when they see a rainbow? Well, it says here in 43:11, and this is from the critical edition. In the passages that I give you in the orange, that's an actual manuscript. Here I'm giving you a transcription of the manuscript. Ra'ah keshet v'rachosea. You saw a keshet, you saw a rainbow, and you blessed the one who made it. So here's an idea, because it's so beautiful. So here's an idea also that shows that this is a rabbinic book. This is not an anti-rabbinic book. This is not a Sadducean book. This is not some sect that we don't agree with. This book actually shows some of the, you can see some of the antecedents of modern halacha right there in this book. The next point I heard when I was in yeshiva, this is I think, an even more impressive point.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, but isn't there a school of thought that you should not say a prayer when you see the rainbow?
No, there's nobody who says you shouldn't say it. There is the following. You're right, and here's where you need some guidance. If somebody tells you there's a rainbow out the window, you don't have to go run to see it. Maybe it's better not to see it. However, nobody says if you see a rainbow, you shouldn't make a blessing on it. When you see a rainbow, you certainly should make a blessing on it. Okay, but so we're not running to see it. Maybe it's not good to see rainbows. But if your friend says, "Hey, come out and see the rainbow," maybe you say, "Oh, it's okay. I'm gonna stay in the house. I'm eating my cookie." But evening, evening. Come on over here and grab a sheet. Welcome. So, but good question. Okay, we're about to compare the view of the Mishlei, the Proverbs, to the book of Ben Sira. We showed that in the Talmud, generally they do quote the book of Ben Sira as a legitimate book, although one Rabbi Kiva says that it's not a good book. But other rabbis say if it has good things, it's fine. He was apparently a Jew who lived in the second century. There are myths that he was a in vitro baby from the sperm of Jeremiah. However, that doesn't really fit very much because Jeremiah lived 586 BCE, and this is 175 BC. So it doesn't fit. But in any event, that's what we know about him. We know he had a grandson who transcribed it. That's what we know. Now, I want to show you that there's another, yes. No, go ahead.
Citing is from some kind of literature and I didn't get that on the top of his head. So.
Well, that's the question. So Brett gets to the essential question. When we say something's part of Tanakh, we assume that it's either direct prophecy from God, like the Chumash, like the prophet. When a prophet says "Kol Hashem," so says God. When we have a proverb, things in the scriptures, when David writes a prayer, when Kohelet ruminates about life, we assume that it's divinely inspired, it's written by Ruach HaKodesh, a very direct divine inspiration, not as direct as prophecy, but something. So the question is, does this book have it? Apparently not. That's why it's not included in the scripture. Someone said, you know what Tanakh is? It's God's direct communication with the Jewish people. It starts with Adam when there was discussion, Abraham, and it ends when the prophecy is over. We have a couple of books about, as prophecy is waning away, and that's it. We're not interested in anything after prophecy. We're not interested. It may be a very wise book, but it's not a prophetic book. So that's probably true. That's why it's not in the canon. However, is it a bad book? So again, even Rav Yosef, who was following Rabbi Kiva, he said, look, if there are good things in it, it's fine. And we saw there are two places in the Talmud they quoted. So how can you say it's bad? The Talmud quotes. I just want to show you that you ask, who is he? He's a guy who lived in a community that eventually becomes the community we know and love, in which there's a Shemona Esrei. Because if you ask, where do the phrases of Shemona Esrei come from? Say, well, some of them are in Tanakh, but some of them are not. So then where do those phrases come from? So look at this Psalm Ben Sira 51. At the end of the book, he has like a Hodul Hashem Kitov Kilam Chasto. Praise God because he's good. And he has different expressions. Hodul is Shomer Yisrael. If you read Hebrew, in the little, we're now on page, what page is this? Page, the Rachem. Yeah, we're still on page 2. And there, in this big paragraph, look at that, the square paragraph. Hodu lekel hatish bachot. Kel hatish bachot is very similar to what we say in what? In Yishtabach. Hodu l'shomer Yisrael. We're going to say that in Marv in 2 minutes. Hodu l'yotzer or. All right, that's in Isaiah, but it's an expression. Goel Yisrael. Bonei Yerushalayim. So we have all these expressions here that eventually become part of Shemona Esrei. We have Magen Avraham. If you look down on page 3, on where you'll see the names of the forefathers, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and you'll see Hodu L'Magen Avraham. It's about 6 lines from the bottom of this prayer at the top of page 3. So just another example that Ben Sira is hanging out in a community that becomes our community. He's not hanging out in some community that's just a bunch of Greek people. And that's the question. Is he more influenced by Greek? If we see wisdom, we're always wondering, is it Greek wisdom? In the book of Judith and Tobit and Jubilees, all these books from the Apocrypha, written in the Second Temple period by Jews, we assume that they're too Greek. And that's why we generally don't read them. What about this book? We'll see in a minute. So here's a very important question. The question that relates to to something. The Greek, is it Greek wisdom or is it Jewish wisdom? What kind of wisdom does it believe in? So let's look at Mishlei. It says, chapter 1, it talks at the beginning of Mishlei, for chapters and chapters, talks about wisdom. So let's look at some of the things. For learning wisdom and discipline. Very often you have a synonym, put one next to another. We're saying sometimes, you know what wisdom is? Things that give you discipline, understanding words of discernment, right? Acquiring the discipline for success, for having seichel, righteousness, justice, and iniquity. You know what wisdom is? Wisdom is good laws, right? For endowing the simple with shrewdness. So here we have the idea of orma. This is a slightly different wisdom. So wisdom, like a street smarts, shrewdness. Not shrewdness as in like tricking someone in business, but shrewdness to know how to get along in a world where many people are crooked. Endowing the young with knowledge and foresight. Wise men, hearing them, will gain more wisdom. Right? The Pirkei Avot, which is based in ethics of fathers, which is based very much on Mishlei. A lot of Mishlei, the roots of, and sometimes it quotes explicitly from Mishlei, from Proverbs. And what does it say in Proverbs? Who is a wise man? This is attributed to way back to the days of Shimon HaTzadik, which is around Ben Sira times. He writes an ode to Shimon HaTzadik. One of the things this Ben Sira does, he writes an ode to Shimon HaTzadik. So he may have lived same time as Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Righteous, and maybe after, he was younger than he was. So Shimon the Righteous saw Alexander the Great, and he didn't. Ben Sira did not. But in any event, what did they say in Pirkei Avos? We say, who is a wise man who sees the future, who sees what's coming? So that we saw the same thing here, foresight, right? What else? For understanding the proverb and epigram, the words of the wise and their riddles, right? Sometimes you have to understand things that are tricky to understand. The fear of the Lord, the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. So here we have another idea. Yirat Hashem Reshit. Beginning of wisdom is knowledge, fear of God. Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. So here we have this is sort of the Jewish idea of wisdom. That's our topic tonight, is the approach to wisdom in the book of Mishlei and Ben Sira. So we mentioned all kinds of wisdom that helps give you street smarts, wisdom that gives you discipline, wisdom that gives you righteousness and justice. And then there's wisdom that's rooted in the fear of God. Now, is that Torah? Probably, right, probably is, but it's hard to say. Maybe he's saying all wisdom, any kind of wisdom you have. First wisdom is you have to have fear of God, right? Because let's say if we talk about the wisdom of staying disciplined, doing the right thing, you don't have fear of God, so then you might know what's right, but you're not going to do the right thing. So then, what kind of wisdom do you have? Mishlei 9. The wisdom has built her house. So there's an idea that she has carved out 7 pillars. Now, wisdom is something that's practical. It helps you build a home, metaphorical home or physical home. Mishlei 13, as we go to page 4, Torah Chacham, Kor Chayim, Masur Mimokshe Mavet, teaching of the wise is the spring of life to turn from the snares of death. It gives you good advice. So again, we're not necessarily talking about Torah as in, wearing tzitzis or putting on tefillin. We're talking about Torah as in things that keep you away from death, right? We know that, if children don't have meaning, they could turn, God forbid, to drugs and suicidality, etc. Have to have meaning. So now, I can't prove to you, other than the verse that said that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of heaven, I can't prove to you that he's talking about Torah. I can't prove it. Maybe he is. Happy is the man, Mishlei 3, who finds wisdom. Wisdom is something you have to seek, right? Understanding is something you have to seek. And then the famous verse that we say when we put away the Torah, she is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Happy is everyone who holds her fast. Talking about wisdom, and then we say it's a tree of life. So we know, we put away the Torah, obviously we're implying that what is a tree of life? What is all its ways of pleasantness? What does that refer, right? Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Obviously we're putting away the Torah. We're claiming that this verse is talking about the Torah, which is the tree of life. necessarily so. Yalkut Shimoni, of course, in the great rabbinic tradition, would say that, right, anybody who engages in Torah, it becomes a potion for life, a medicine for life. As it says, Eitz Chaim Machazikim Ba. And there are other verses in Proverbs that say it's healing for your flesh, right? So, however, if you engage with Torah in the wrong way, then it's not good. And he goes on, why is Torah compared to a tree? Because with a tree, you have 2 sticks and can make it fire. So even a small stick can make a fire. Even a student can help the rabbi become more sharp. Very good. So the rabbis believe that this is talking about Torah. So now we have sort of 2 traditions. Whenever you look at some of the books of the Bible, particularly the wisdom literature, the books of wisdom, like Job and Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, and Mishlei, parts of Tehillim, when you look at these books, there's the book at the simple level, which in case you'll say Solomon was a heretic. Well, what kind of things is he saying? He's so skeptical in the book of Kohelet. That's at the simple level. But then you have to look at the book as it was accepted by the rabbis. The rabbis don't have a book of skepticism in their Bible. The rabbis have the book of Kohelet as they interpret it. So you could say that Mishlei talks about wisdom. It doesn't spell out whether it's the Torah, whether the Torah is the ultimate wisdom. It doesn't say. But we, the Jews, have only accepted Mishlei as per the rabbis. That's, you see, why is Mishlei part of the Tanakh? Because the rabbi said so. What do the rabbis say? The same rabbis, what do they say? They say that the wisdom that the Mishlei is talking about is the Torah. But on the other hand, we have to remember that there's a simple meaning of the Torah, of the Tanakh text, and at a simple level, it's not necessarily talking about Torah. So we don't have explicit verses that say in Mishlei that the Torah is the best schira, that the Torah is the best wisdom. We have other verses, we'll see them later, but not necessarily. Also, is this part of a Solomonic tradition? Book of Kings 1, chapter 5, verse 10. What does he say? He spoke about. Now you could say he spoke to the trees, but you could say that he spoke about the trees from the cedar in Lebanon. He could speak about the smallest tree that's growing in the wall, and he spoke about animals, birds, things that creep. He spoke about fish. He could discourse about anything. Solomon. Everyone came from all the nations, including the Queen of Sheba and all those people, to hear the wisdom of Solomon. So we like to think maybe in our rabbinic minds, Solomon was teaching Torah. But the simple reading is Solomon teaching wisdom. So it's not surprising when the books of wisdom attributed to Solomon don't have to be about wisdom, about Torah. They could be about general wisdom. Good. Excellent. Right. Very good. Excellent. Brett makes
We
it.
couldn't hear him.
Brett, yeah, I'll repeat. Brett is
you.
arguing. Brett's not. He's arguing that when you want to know the Torah's wisdom, you can't necessarily just read the book, the Shema, read the story of the Sota. That doesn't tell you wisdom. You have to get to the lumdus, to the essence of the law, like they do in a high level class in Yeshiva University, in a yeshiva, in the Brisker yeshiva, in those who study Talmud at the highest levels, where they get to the essential message that's there, and when you extract that, you have pearls of wisdom that you can share with anybody. We have a rabbi here, Rabbi Grunwald. He's studying in a yeshiva in Israel, whose name will come to me in a moment. And in his yeshiva, they have Re'ema Cohen. He put out a book on the Talmud. He got a general Israel prize for it. He was writing about the Talmud, but it extracted so much of the essence of the messages that everyone could understand what he's talking about. So it could be, what do we say? Why are Gedolei Torah people were great in Torah? Why are they so wise? People come to ask their counsel. What do they know about business or that? So as Brett argues, when you're imbued with all these essential teachings of the Torah, truly it gives you wisdom. Good. So you could say that Solomon gets the wisdom through the Torah. What was he specifically talking about? He was talking about birds. Now, maybe something in the Torah about birds. I don't know. One might argue that the Torah is not a science book. It doesn't talk about birds. It doesn't talk about the wisdom of birds so much. We'll see. There's some verses. But in any event, what else? We see in Psalm 104. Again, Proverbs and Psalms are both considered part of wisdom literature. In modern scholarship, they're all considered part of Emet, the book of Eov, Mishlei, and Tehillim, the book of Emet. Those books have a lot of wisdom in them. Again, some Proverbs have nothing to do with wisdom, but this one does. Psalm 104. Very famous verse. You made the heavens with great wisdom. And what is it talking about? That there's a great Yam HaGadol, there's a vast and wide sea, there are creatures beyond number, living things, small and great. That the creation of God, that is also Chachma, right? We know that when they made the Mishkan, that was also Chachma, right? So we know that Chachma in the Torah has a broader definition than just Torah in its narrow sense. Good. So I would say that from a rabbinic perspective, Mishlei is all about Torah. From a simple sense of the text, Mishlei is about wisdom, which is related to Torah, but it's not. However, what about Ben Sira? So let's see how frum Ben Sira is. Then we're going to put him to the litmus test. We want to know, should we throw him out of the yeshiva? Should we throw him out of Baron Hirsch or not? So let's read a little Ben Sira. So again, I tried to get mostly from the Hebrew transcriptions and then an English translation of that. By the way, it turns out that the Greek translation were not so bad, and it wasn't terrible, but still, I want to have the exact, I want to have the Hebrew. All wisdom is from God, right? Very first point. All wisdom is from God. It's with him forever. There's, who can count all the wisdom? Who can count the height of the sky? Who can count? Let's just move it up here in the PowerPoint. Who can count? But exceeding the scope of these is wisdom. The truth is broader still. It's true the sky is very high. The depth of the sea is very deep. But even bigger than that is wisdom. And the truth is even broader. So its truth is very great. The root of wisdom, like Brett is talking about, who knows it? And the wiles of it, who knows? There's only one who's so great. He's uniquely awesome, right? He scrutinized her and examined her and counted her and gave her to his lovers, gave the wisdom to his lovers. Unto all flesh he gave her according to his desire, and he will give her to his lovers. So it could be implying here that true wisdom he gave to the people that God loves. And who would those people be? The Jews, the Israelites. So that we may have a more narrow view here of wisdom. Yirat Hashem Samach Alev here, a similar idea we had in Proverbs, that the fear of God gladdens the heart. The fear of God gives you everything: joy, grace, length of days. So it's practical. Wisdom gives you practical things, lengthens your days. Good. It speaks about the fear of heaven. A direct quote from Mishlei. It's not everything in Ben Sira is completely unique or original. Same verse from Proverbs. From eternity has been prepared. This is an idea. If it's talking about Torah, it's very similar to the rabbinic idea that Torah was what? Before the world was created, the Torah was given. It brings a lot of shalom and chayim and marpeh and refuah, well-being. Good. Now, again, are we talking about? Here it's talking a lot. There's a lot of reference here to the fear of heaven. So maybe there's greater evidence that he's talking about Torah than talking about plain wisdom. Well, that's going to ruin the whole class. No, obviously Torah is a subset of wisdom, but the question is, which Torah is he referring to? So in Proverbs, it's not so clear. Only by midrashic method is it necessarily referring to Torah, but not necessarily. What about over here? Here it's not, in this chapter, it's not absolutely clear. Happy is someone who engages in it. It's good. It's better for him than the treasures. Happy is someone who comes close to it. Ufkudeh might mean those who, in her presence. It could also mean the laws. Maybe it means the laws. Ateret olam tashid alav. He says you can rejoice in it. You should never leave it. Even the angels enjoy it, and they praise God. Angels of God will rejoice in her and recount all the praises of the Lord. So that does sound like Torah. Hasefer hazeh kulo malei mimena. Ashreinu shishma hazeh. And this recounting is entirely replete with her. Is it the book? He says the recounting. Recounting could be the book. Is he referring to the book of the Torah? Happy is one who listens to it. No, is this talking about general wisdom? This is more specifically talking about Torah. It's the inheritance of God. End of page 5, on to page 6. Attend and act upon all of my words that may be written in the book of life. Again, is that Torah? So come close to it, you'll find, right? So there's a little more evidence that we're talking not about general wisdom, but about fear of heaven. He keeps coming back to fear of heaven. It's not just once in a while. Be very careful. Do not alter God's word. Do not alter his word. Right? We're talking about Torah. For the Lord reveal your secrets and bring your downfall in the midst of the community. Secrets are in the Torah. For you exalt yourself with feigned piety, with your heart is full of shame. Some people are fakers. What else? Chapter 2 here in Ben Sira. If you come close to worship God, prepare yourself. So he's talking about mitzvos. Prepare your heart, right? Cling to it. Don't veer from it. Don't turn away. You have a great future. These are expressions usually connected with God, connecting with Torah, not to turn away from Torah. Ben Sira, chapter 14. Happy is someone who engages in wisdom. Okay, that could be general wisdom. Good. You look out the window, you pry through her window, you hearken to her doors. This could be general wisdom. What else? Good. Chapter 15. One who fears God will do this. Tofes Torah yadrichana. Talks about Torah. Chapter 7. Again, Torah could be general guidance, but it might mean Torah. It shall meet you like a mother, receive you like youth. It gives you the bread of seichel, right? Bread of smarts. If you lean on it, so it does mention Torah at the beginning of the section. Now, so far what we've shown is that in the book of Ben Sira, wisdom, probably talking about Torah, fear of God is a very prominent theme. It's something you read, it's connected to the mitzvos, but in chapter, which is not found in the Hebrew, granted, chapter 24, it is more clear. Look at this. Wisdom sing her own praises among her own people. She proclaims her glory. Whose people? The Jews. In the assembly of the Most High, she opens her mouth in the presence of his host. She tells her glory. The mouth of the Most High came forth and covered the earth like a mist. The heights of heaven I dwelt, in my throne in a pillar of cloud. The vault of heaven I compassed alone and walked through the deep abyss, over waves in the deep abyss, over all the land, over every people and nation I held sway. Among all these I sought a resting place. This is the famous God sought to give the Torah to other nations. And whose inheritance should I abide? Then the Creator, right? So this is a precursor of the Midrash that we have. Again, all Midrashim that we have are not from the 2nd century BC. This is earlier than that. This is the idea that God brought the Torah all around to different nations. Then the Creator of all gave me his command. And my Creator chose a spot for my tent. He said, in Jacob make your dwelling, in Israel your inheritance. For all ages from the beginning he created me. Through all ages I shall not cease to be. Now again, what are we talking about? Well, it doesn't say wisdom yet. Let's see if it uses the expression wisdom. And the city he loves me and he gave me rest. In Jerusalem, my domain, he put Torah in Jerusalem. I struck root among the glorious people in the heritage, from the portion of the Lord, his heritage. Like a cedar in Lebanon, I grew tall, right? I grew tall like a palm in En Gedi, famous place in Israel, the rose bush in Jericho, like a fair olive tree in the field, like cinnamon and fragrant cane, etc. Verse 16, I spread out my branches and I bud forth, etc. Verse 19, come to me, all who desire me, and be filled with my fruits. This is very reminiscent of verses in Proverbs where it says, come to me. You will remember me as sweeter than honey. Torah is described as sweeter than honey. Better than to have honeycombs. Those who eat of me will hunger still. Who drink of me will thirst for more. You always have more thirst for Torah. Whoever obeys me, talking about the Torah, will not be put to shame. And those who serve me shall never go astray. All this is the book of my covenant, the Most High God, the law which Moses commanded us, the heritage, it overflows like the Pishon with wisdom. Like the Tigris at the time of first fruits, it runs over like Euphrates with understanding. It's another word for wisdom. And like the Jordan with harvest time, it floods like the Nile with instruction. It's a type of wisdom. The first human being never finished comprehending wisdom, nor will the last succeed in fathoming her. For deeper than the sea are her thoughts, her counsels of the great abyss. Now I like a stream from the river and a water channel in the garden, etc., etc. Page 10. Again, I will make my teachings shine forth in the dawn. I will spread their brightness from afar. I will pour out the instruction. These are all words for like Torah, like prophecy, and bestow it on generations yet to come. So here we have one more thing. Ben Sira 33. Ish navon yavin devar Hashem. A wise man, you know what he does? He knows the word of God. Torah to keurim b'choshen. His Torah is like the breastplate, which gives you guidance. And Sira 51, a very important institution, which I gave you here in the original. Well, what page are we on? This is page 10. Pinu Elai Schalim, you fools, turn to me. Velinu bebeis midrashai, and rest in my base medrash. The actual expression base medrash probably never appeared before this expression right here. Early evidence of the idea of a base medrash, right? The Arabs call madrasa or whatever, right? A place of investigation and inquiry about Torah. How long will you be thirsty, and etc. I'm close to those who seek the Torah. A lot of people heard me, and etc. etc. So here's what I want to propose. We're now 45 minutes into this class. This is what I want to propose. And there are many professors, many people who agree with this approach. The book of Mishlei, at its simple level, is a book of wisdom. Wisdom is defined very broadly. It's defined broadly in Eov and Job. We'll see in a moment. It's defined broadly in the Psalms. It's defined broadly in the building of the Mishkan. Wisdom is a general field. King Solomon taught wisdom at a very broad level. Grounded in the Torah, fine, but he's talking about very broad concepts. That's Mishlei at the simple level. We as Torah Jews and as Midrash, etc., obviously we're going to take every verse we can find in Proverbs and we're going to say that it's talking about the Torah, knowing full well that at the simple level, it's talking about wisdom in general. Again, there's no contradiction. Torah is a subset of wisdom, so no question. Or you could say Torah includes all wisdom. Torah is not the subset, but Torah is all wisdom. And then Kulabad, as it says in the Ethics of the Fathers, everything's in it. And there's a reminiscent verse to that we read before. Everything's in the Torah. So you could say that you could claim that the distinction we're making tonight is frivolous because Torah is wisdom, wisdom is Torah. But if you ask, what's the simple meaning of the verses in Mishlei? It's not a book that's telling you, read the Torah. Torah has got a lot of wisdom in it. It's not the simple reading of it. That's the Midrash agree. And of course, if we're looking for Torah, if the book of Mishlei tells us to seek Torah, what are we going to do? I'm saying seek wisdom. What are we going to do? We're going to learn Torah. It's a great place to get wisdom. But so is looking at the trees and contemplating the heavens. It's also a source. And of course, there's no mitzvah to contemplate the heavens. More time studying Torah. But I'm arguing that the simple meaning of Mishlei is not talking about Torah, but the rabbis, based on whom we accept the book of Mishlei as a book. We as Jews, we don't read the book of Mishlei as not talking about Torah. When we put away the Torah every week, we all assume the Mishlei is talking about Torah. That rabbinic assumption that the ultimate wisdom is Torah and that we should focus on that wisdom, that's the philosophy of Ben Sira. Which book is frummer? Here's my radical idea. Which book is frummer? Mishlei or Ben Sira? Oh, you say Mishlei is, well, why is Mishlei frummer? Obviously Mishlei is frummer because Mishlei has to be more frum, has to be more religious, more pious, more Jewish than Ben Sira because it's acceptance enough. It's written, it's inspired by God. It's wisdom of Solomon. Comes from Shlomo himself. Chizkiah gives a stamp of approval. So it has to be from him. But in terms of which book says Torah is the best chayra, that Torah is the best wisdom, you know which book says that explicitly? Ben Sira. Ben Sira, which is thrown out by Rabbi Akiva as a bad book. That's the book that has that attitude because it's a very Jewish book. He's living in a community that a couple hundred years becomes the rabbis we know and love. He's a student of maybe Shimon Tzaddik. He's an acquaintance of Shimon Tzaddik. So it's such a Jewish book that he reads. When he rewrites Mishlei, when he writes his own Proverbs, he rewrites it the way rabbis would write it. If Rabbi Akiva was rewriting Mishlei, it would sound like Ben Sira because any rabbi who reads Mishlei sees it as what? Torah. So he rewrites the Proverbs, and it's all about Torah. So let's take a look. Why were the apocryphal books denied? They were too Greek. But which book is more Greek? Mishlei or Ben Sira? Well, Mishlei read on the surface is more Greek than Ben Sira. Mishlei read midrashically and Jewishly. It's very Jewish because every time you say wisdom, I'm thinking Torah. Now, when we talk about is there such a thing as general wisdom? So the Midrash says the famous statement that among the Goyim there's no Torah. He said, someone tells you there's wisdom among the Goyim, you should believe it. But if somebody says Yesh Torah Goyim, someone says, oh, I really know what the calibrations is. Go to that minister, go to that professor who's not Jewish. He'll explain to you how to read Parshas Vayishlach. No, that we don't believe. So we see. So this midrash reflects an idea that there's wisdom sort of outside the Torah. There's wisdom that the Gentiles have. Maybe that was the wisdom that Solomon shared. Again, maybe the wisdom came from the Torah. It's a good argument for it. Now, I don't want to make it seem like Mishlei is not a frum book. You have, for instance, Mishlei 6:23. Ner mitzvah v'torah or. A candle is a mitzvah, page 11, and the Torah is light. So a mitzvah is just a candle. But the Torah, wisdom from the Torah, that's a big light. It's like a Havdalah candle. It's like a floodlight. And the way of life is a rebuke of. It's also the way of life is a rebuke that disciplines. Different ways of reading that. But in any event, so I don't want to tell you that in Mishlei you won't find allusions to Torah. You do, but generally speaking, it's on the surface of it. Mishlei speaks about wisdom, not Torah. Now, the idea, in general, if you would ask me, wake me up in the middle of the night and say, page 11, and you would say to me, does the Torah refer to Torah as wisdom? So a beautiful expression here in Parshas Devarim, Ushmartem vasitem, you should keep the mitzvos, because the mitzvos are your wisdom. Even among the Gentiles want to know what Ray Cohen has to say. How does he explain the Talmud? How does he explain the Bible? If that's our real wisdom. So the Torah itself in Devarim claims that the ultimate wisdom is Torah. They'll hear the chukim, the laws of the Torah. They'll say, "What a surely a great nation and a wise and discerning people we are." So surely there is an idea that Torah is wisdom. Again, that's more of the Ben Sira idea, and not so much the explicit surface level of the Mishlei reading. What's the relationship in general between the general wisdom and Torah wisdom? So the Rabbi Bachya says that he was a rabbi in Spain, 13th century student of the Ramban. He says wisdom can be divided in three parts. Number one is the wisdom of creation, and everything to do with nature. Second one is things that are practical to have a disciplined life. And the third is the wisdom of God, and that's his Torah. So there are different wisdoms. Brett was trying to combine them all. There are different wisdoms according to him. There's a limit to our wisdom, etc. But the Rambam writes that wisdom includes four things: knowing the truth, and also various trades and how they work, and also ethics, like Nietzschean ethics, the ethics of Aristotle, the ethics of Proverbs and Mishlei. And also wisdom can be cleverness, of trying to figure stuff out. So there are different elements of wisdom, and so we have to understand that Torah is more part of that understanding truth. So there are different types of wisdom. Again, I would argue that Mishlei is speaking about a very broad type of wisdom, and that Torah is a more narrow one. But again, as we believe that the greatest wisdom is Torah, however, there are other wisdoms as well, and we have to pursue them. Sefer Hasidim says that Sefer Hasidim is a little bit anti-general wisdom. He says all chachmas are hinted to in the Torah. This is Brett's idea. And if somebody says, why doesn't God make us like Solomon? He says, look, Solomon had all that wisdom. What happened to him? He failed. So don't tell me how great wisdom is. Didn't do Solomon much good. Didn't do him much good. He failed. So that's that. The Sefer Hasidim represents sort of right-wing view. He was a very extreme kind of 11th century Hasidim. They were not the modern Hasidim, but the medieval Hasidim. And he says general wisdom is fooey. You don't need much of it. It doesn't do you much good. The Rosh Haran, who was a very, I would say, more sophisticated thinker in the 14th century in Spain, he says there are wisdoms that they make you smarter, but they take you away from the derech hachayim, from the way of life, the derech of Misa, the day of death, the way of death. They give you bad ideas, and they make you, they ruin you. But Torah will not leave you with any foolish ideas or bad truth. You see that sometimes you have a great professor, oh, he's so brilliant, listen to his lecture, and he curses in the middle of it, talks about his girlfriend, he's got, his life is not as beautiful as his words or his books or his ideas. True. The Malbim is struggling with, general wisdom, haskalah, that's coming up in the 19th century among the Reform movement, among those who were professors and all that. And he says, look, there's one way is chachma, and the other thing is foolishness. Chachma is things that are good, what's good, what's bad. But chachma generally is outside the soul, but Torah is inside the soul. That's his idea. That when we talk about study of Torah and how important it is, because we're trying to get some wisdom is knowledge. We put it in our brain. We have neurons that connect it. When we learn Torah, hopefully it goes into our neshama, our kishkas, and it's a whole different kind of thing. Okay. What about the relationship of Torah and science in general? So Rabbi Tzvi Tzedensky, in a Gush website, he lays out the Rambam versus Yehuda Levi. Rambam being more left-wing, for lack of a better word, and Rabbi Yehuda being more right-wing. But the Rambam says the Madavadas, science and religion, all bring you to the truth. In other words, if the idea is to pursue, if wisdom is to pursue truth, so it's all part of the same thing. Science, chemistry, physics, it's all in the pursuit of truth. According to Rabbi Yehuda Levi, the goal of science is to know, but the goal of religion is to cling to God. completely different goal. We don't study Torah to be wise. We study Torah to be close with God. So to be close with God. So it's a whole different story. So if you had to choose between the Mishlei simple idea of just embracing wisdom in general versus studying Torah, right? So obviously you would choose Torah because it brings you closer to God. The Rambam would say you need everything because you want to be wise. So you have to have all wisdom. You want to get to the truth. You have to know the truth about science, physics, everything else. Some people would say that, well, those sciences, they're flawed. Today we think the cosmos started like this. Tomorrow they say something else. So Torah is more close to the real truth. Rabbi Norland was most famous for the idea of Torah. Umada wrote a book about Torah and science, and he tried to believe that there was one system. It's not a two-track system. If there's one system, all knowledge, unless one attaches oneself to God, the sole source of knowledge remains partial. Everything is partial. But for Rav Kook, all entities, whether material or conceptual, including various components of Torah, are truly one. So all science, it all goes into one wisdom. That's why the Rambam, you could have a book about the cosmos in his book, in his magnum opus of the Yad HaChazaka. One book is about the cosmos. What's that doing in there? I read it as a kid. I said, I'm closing this book. I don't know. What's he talking about? He's talking about the cosmos the way he saw them in the 11th century. But for the Rambam, science is part of it. Now, science is often flawed. Today's science is flawed. It's not as good as the science 200 years from now. But it is part of the pursuit of wisdom. Prophecy and halacha must be understood in relation to one another. For ultimately, they're all one and the same. Everything is all together. Alam says for Rav Kook, the universe is comprised not of sacred and profane. There aren't good wisdoms and bad wisdom, but of holy and not yet holy. Everything can be holy. Through the encounter of Torah and wisdom, a higher truth emerges. We can get to something even higher. So when we look tonight, you can look at it sort of as two opposing ideas. There is this wisdom that may be a little bit too Greek, which may be, again, maybe who started it. We can have like a food fight. Who started it? Whether the Greeks start this idea of wisdom with their ancient Jews like Solomon, who were into this idea of pure wisdom. But whoever it was, that's one idea. And then we have this other idea of Torah. And again, we can synthesize it. We don't have to view it as two opposing ideas. We can synthesize it. We could say Mishlei speaks a lot about plain wisdom, and there's a lot to be said for that. And it comes together with Torah wisdom. One of these rabbis was arguing Torah wisdom. Plain wisdom. Look what happened to Solomon. In other words, Solomon itself, the fact that Solomon wrote the Mishlei, shows you what happens when you have all the wisdom. What happens when you have all this wisdom? Nothing. He became idolater. So maybe the Torah itself and the story of Solomon, and even presenting the wisdom of Solomon, maybe it's not the ultimate wisdom. If you ask, why don't Jews quote more from Proverbs? If this is the wisdom of Solomon, we should be quoting it all the time. Now, if you're a Yemenite Jew and you sit in shul and you just keep reciting the Proverbs, you probably would recite Proverbs a little more than we do. However, one might also argue that the Proverbs were not Jewish enough. The Proverbs were about general wisdom, and that's not our ultimate goal, is general wisdom. We're more interested in Torah wisdom, generally speaking. However, one could synthesize the two and say that both are important: general wisdom, Torah wisdom, and that our understanding of Mishlei is the most correct understanding, which says, look, there are many wisdoms out there, and the wisdom we learn from the ants. There's this chapter in Proverbs that talks about that. The wisdom we learn from everything around us, wisdom of nature. There's that, and there's the wisdom of the Torah, and together it creates the most magnificent thing, which Ben Sira spoke about. So anyway, again, the ironic point we made tonight that the book of Ben Sira seems more Jewish than the Jewish book itself. But again, we don't understand that Jewish book. We understand it in a Jewish way, but it's really a book of Ben Sira that takes the most Jewish point of view. But again, what is the ultimate Jewish point of view? Is it more the Haredi view, the ultra-Orthodox view? There's only one wisdom in Torah and there's nothing else, or is it the more modern Orthodox view that there's Torah and general knowledge, and together you seek the truth? That's the ultimate thing. Or is the Sefer Chassidim right that if you have too much general knowledge, you end out like Solomon, landed out in a bad direction. So in any event, it's a fascinating question. And as the weeks go on, we'll continue to look at these other issues. We'll look at friendship, and we're going to look at mishpacha and the attitudes toward these things. We'll see which one has an attitude, Ben Sira versus Mishlei, which one has an attitude that you appreciate more, which one has an attitude that we think is more Jewish, and which one more divinely inspired and more beautiful. And we'll be the judge of that as weeks go on. And is there a reason the book of Ben Sira was thrown out? So on this week, I would say, well, it was it's a very traditional book from the point of view of wisdom. It's very traditional. It's got chapter 24, speaks about Torah and the centrality of Torah. However, maybe it went too far. Maybe it's a Haredi book. Maybe it's a book that's saying that the general wisdom is nothing. Only wisdom is Torah. And we believe in more of a dichotomy. We believe in more of a synthesis. Both ideas are true. Torah is very important, and general wisdom is important. We have to pursue all of them in the pursuit of truth. Maybe his ideas are actually maybe very, very Jewish. Maybe they're too Jewish, or maybe they're wrong. So in any event, I'll let you think about that. For that, we're just 2 minutes over, and with that, we'll stop here. A couple of minutes left for Marv. Any questions or comments? No, let's see. Yes, tomorrow night we have Daf Yomi, and that's 6:55. And then next week we will meet again on Monday night. I'm sorry, Tuesday night at 6:45. Okay. Hope you can join us. Thank you all for joining us. Any last questions or anything? Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hey, take care. Be well.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.